Thank you guys, and I think it's good. It's good always, you know, a word of thanks. For me, I am always very thankful that we can do this kind of stuff every night. This is putting God's gifts to work, really, when you see people up here playing music, when you have people, like my wife and some other people that that help with the food, the small group that was here today. It's a really beautiful thing to see that. And just even in the relationships I see with many other people, I kind of view it that way. It's people putting certain gifts at work, and sometimes the thing that draws people together are similarity in gifts. So so you can kind of get you kind of got the theme of what I'm gonna talk about today. How do I use God's gifts? And to understand a little context, I'm going to walk you through this and help you to understand how God's love, His amazing grace, fits into all of this, and how I really think His love can transform the way you look at so many things, not just yourself, but so many things in your life, because that's what it does for me on a regular basis. James chapter 1 verse 17 says this: "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." The point is this: everything that I have in life, I would say the greatest gift, I'll talk about this in a little bit, but the greatest gift that I have is God's gift of love given to me through Jesus. I see evidence of that. The embodiment of that is Jesus on the cross. Okay, that is God's greatest gift to me, but He gives me, that would be big G grace, okay? It gives me the gift of forgiveness, eternal life, and restores my relationship with God. That's all His work. But then He also gives me what I'd call little G grace, which is, all good gifts, okay? That would include some other things that I have in my life, and you can kind of contemplate that yourself. What are the little G gifts of grace that God's offered to you in your life? And I think everybody has a season in life. Sometimes I find myself in a season in my life where sometimes I'm so focused on the things I don't have that it's hard to see the things that I do have. And sometimes I find myself in a season of abundance where it seems like I have tons of things great going on, but those seasons tend to be a little shorter, unfortunately, sometimes. If you're somebody today who struggles a little bit with the concept of God, or how I can believe God comes to me, in terms of Jesus and all the miracles and all these sorts of things, I would encourage you to stick it out the next 3 weeks. I'm going to remind you this over and over again, because in 3 weeks I'm going to be talking specifically about addressing some of those difficult questions. But today, since I'm talking about growth, I'm going to be focusing more on the tail end, which is God has offered me grace. And so how does that look like in my life? And how does that affect the way I look at the stuff that He gives me? Okay? And that brings into issue this whole concept of stewardship. Laura mentioned that word several times. It's kind of thought of as a churchy word, but historically, stewardship is not really a churchy word. It's just, farmers, oftentimes you look back in history, when people were cultivating land, getting large pieces of property, what they would do is they would hire people out to be stewards of different pieces of their property. They would be in charge of that land, and being a steward of that land didn't mean that you owned it. It just means that a farmer or a landowner who owned all that property was saying, "Here, I'm going to give you this chunk of land, and I want you to take good care of it. I want you to make sure that you get crops, that it produces things, and then what you're going to do is you're going to sell that stuff, and you're going to give me back a portion." Okay? I mean, that's historically what's happened, and people do that in a variety of ways, I would say that this works too, just in terms of a regular old job. Like if I worked at the Gap once in my life. Oh, it was a season of my life. Oh, is this on videotape? No, I worked at the Gap at a season of my life. And so I could even say that I was entrusted with clothing, with stuff. I was supposed to fold it. I wasn't supposed to throw it away, throw it in the trash, rip it, or anything like that. I was entrusted with that. And what happened was, because if I did my job and I didn't mishandle it, I would get a paycheck. Okay? It's you can see that in a whole variety of ways. If you clean somebody's house, okay, that's what you're doing. You're steward of. They're opening up their door to you, saying, "Here's my house. I'd like you to take care of it," and you're taking care of, helping them take care of it. But then they're giving you a piece of that. So, it all works together. And so, ultimately, all gifts come from God. Okay, and to understand how this works, you have to go back to creation. You You got to open up the Bible to Genesis chapter 1, and what you learn right away is that God created the world. He is the creator, okay? God the Father is my maker. He's my father. I'm his child, okay? He made me. He gave me everything I have. So in Genesis, you find out that in 6 days, God created the world. We can talk about those things elsewhere. I'm not going to get into details on that. But God created the heavens. He created everything on it, including people, okay? And this is what you find out in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. God makes man, makes the first man and woman. And this is what it says. It says, so God created man in his own image. So humanity was created in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Do you notice that he created all this stuff first? Then he makes the first human beings and says, okay, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. And have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So you are to take care of it. This is mine. I made it. I am the creator. But I want you to dwell in it, and I want you to care for it. I want you to be my stewards. That's what he's saying, right? So the image of God, though, this is the question. What does that mean? The image of God is basically this. I believe that I was made in God's image, and what this means is I am to reflect God's characteristics, if you will, into the world. God is the perfect definition of love. And so the greatest thing I can do is love my neighbor and be a reflection of God's unconditional love to me, to others. Of course, I do that very imperfectly, but that's what I'm called to do. And in other ways, I'm called to reflect God into the world. All right? And what you find out in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, is God creates the first human beings, and what does he do? He took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden and to work it and keep it. So human beings are not created to just sit lazily by, I need something to kick my feet up on here. That's not what he created me to do. He didn't create me to just sit on my bottom all day long and just, sleep. There's a reason why, when I talk to some of you and some of you express frustration with I don't have a job or something like that, and especially in an economy where it's hard to get a job, it can be frustrating. And the reason for that is because I believe all human beings were created to work. And when you're not working or you're having a hard time getting a job, it's frustrating because you're not doing what you're created to do. And then on top of all of that, you're not getting income. It just brings other stresses with it. And so it can also create some anger with God. But you see, before God puts us to work in the world, he gives us certain things that kind of give us an idea of how we're being put to work in the world. So let me help you see that. First of all, God gives everybody time, okay? And you can contemplate this a little bit. Does God give you a lot of time or a little bit of time? I know some people who have lots and lots of time on their hands, and that can be a dangerous thing, actually, because when you have too much time on your hands, it can be very easy. In my own experience, I've found this. It can be easy to do destructive things that not only do me harm, but can harm other people. But then again, you might be somebody who finds yourself having too little time. I really find myself in this season of my life. I have 3 little kids. I'm a pastor at a really busy church, and there's a lot of things going on. I'm a husband, and so I have lots of things going on, and so sometimes it feels like I have no time for myself. And so for me, it's incredibly important to manage or budget my time. I can't always do it perfectly, but that's when you have very little time. If you're in that season, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's important to say, okay, I have this amount of time, and this is what I'm going to do with it. But I would say that if you have a lot of time, it's the same thing. You should probably, if you have too much, maybe you should find ways to plug productive work in there, because that's what God wants you to do. All right, so time is one thing that God gives us. Another thing that he gives us is treasures. Sorry, I had nothing better to put up on the screen but a treasure chest, but the reason I did that was because there's so many treasures that God gives. Treasures could include like money would probably be the ultimate thing in this culture that I live in. We tend to measure worth sometimes by how much stuff you have, by how much money you make, by how big your house is, by how many toys you have. And so, that's why they have things like lifestyles of the rich and famous, and they show all this stuff. He has like 2 pools and, 5 hot tubs. Oh, and guess what? An indoor basketball court. Really? And it's just, it's like, and, I can't help but watch it and be like, that's pretty sweet, but if I had all that stuff, I wouldn't be able to use it all even, So that's kind of the thing that's communicated in our culture, but God gave treasures, and I would say money, possessions. You could include, if you have an abundance of food, if you have more than you need, or if you have an abundance of friends or family. Family is a blessing too. They're treasures. They are, absolutely. And what do you do with these things? God says that my possessions, my money, all the things that I have, before sin came into the world, the purpose for all those things was to be put in service to others. So the stuff I have, it's not for me to use for myself. It's for me to bless others with. And then other people would look at it. Think about how cool this is, though. If people see it that way, guess what how they think of their possessions? To serve me, too. But it's not something I have to demand or ask for, because that's just the way things are. Can you imagine a world like that, where people are like, oh, I got all this cool stuff. Who can I give it to? That's not the world that we live in. But that's the world that God made. And it's broken, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a second. So think about this. What do you have in your life? What are your treasures? What are your greatest treasures? You can define this in many different ways, and think about how do you use those treasures, And the reason I can say people fit into the same category too is because children, for example, they're given, like I believe as a father, I've been given children so that I can teach them about God's love, about Jesus, so that then they too will raise their children to teach them about Jesus. And hopefully, by God's grace, be decent stewards of what they have. I screw up all the time, but I do the best I can. You see, and that's so if you have people in your life, they're there for you to love and serve. And if they're little ones, I would say teaching them how they're going to basically take care of their own gifts, which include talents. Talents would be the things that maybe we can't see on the outside right away, but we have nonetheless. So I know, for example, that there are some people in here who are very good at construction work, or I'll tell you, I do the best I can. I can watch somebody do something like fix my furnace or something like that, and maybe I could. No, I can't. I couldn't fix my furnace if I watched them do that. Let's see. Let me think of a better example. I could watch somebody. I could watch them drywall, okay? And then maybe I could do that afterwards, all right? But I know the limitations of my skills. I was not blessed with those types of gifts, and so I do the best I can, because I can't just hire people to do it all the time. But thankfully, I live in a community where people oftentimes will offer some of those gifts for, just because I'm a neighbor, because I'm a friend, because I'm a pastor, they'll do that. And that's part of being in a community. I had somebody come over, my furnace was broken, and he was willing to just give some of his time to come over and check out my furnace and take a look at it. And let me tell you, I was watching this going, I have no idea what he's doing. This is crazy. Going back to that furnace thing, that's why it wouldn't work. There are other people, for example, who are just gifted at building relationships. I look at people out here and I see some of you, and this is why it's important to understand this. You might be someone who says, I don't have anything. I don't have any money. I have nothing. And yet if you stop for a second and you hold a mirror to yourself and you think about yourself, your life, you'll begin to realize that you do have gifts. That even though you may not have the gifts that this world may say are most important, you have gifts that are every bit as important. And if you put them to work, you can not only be blessed, but bless so many other people. I'll give my aunt as an example. My Aunt Mary, she's not here, so she'd be okay with me mentioning her. I'm telling you, you just go, we go on vacation with my aunt every now and then. My family gets together for the summers, and we go to some random place. We just go to Walmart and we're going to shop. And we get back to the car, and my aunt's the type of lady that's like, oh, I met 5 new people I'm Facebook friends with, and guess what they do? They do this and this and this and this and this, and they have 12 cousins, and one of them lives in Michigan. Is that close to where you live? She's talking about all this stuff. I'm like, when did you have time to learn all this? That's the way my aunt is. She just loves people, and she finds herself next to somebody, and she just cares about people so much. She is actually interested, if she meets a complete stranger, and she may never meet them again. Where I sometimes find myself, in a store, and somebody strikes up a conversation, and the thing in my mind is, I'll probably never talk to this person again. So really, should I invest time in meeting and getting to know this person? That's kind of the way it works. But my aunt is not that way. She just has that gift of She loves building relationships. And I would say I also love relationships, but it's not in that same way I struggle, And there's others. Maybe you're somebody that's gifted at teaching. Maybe you're somebody who's gifted at organizing. Maybe you're a type A person like Laura, she mentioned earlier. Maybe you're that person. Or maybe you have the gifts of actually, I think other types of personalities can be a blessing as well, that you don't get stressed out about when things are out of control. We can tend to balance one another out that way sometimes. So the point I'm making is that times, treasures, and talents are very important. And let's see, could I get a click? I don't have a next. There we go, thank you. This clicker's not working for some reason. So, being a steward, if you could imagine, I gave you that land analogy earlier. So God, there have been times in history where people are given a plot of land, and the owner says, okay, I want you to take care of it, and I'll give you a portion, all right? But this is not your land, it still belongs to the owner. This is the way all the gifts that are given, that's the way they work. Time, talents, and treasures are not, from a biblical perspective, they are not mine. I do not own them, okay? And stewardship is when you talk about that word stewardship, it's the idea that I don't own this, and how I use them then is important. If I get that, if I understand that, then it's going to change the way I look at how I use everything, all right? But this is also why the fall is something that I have to bear in mind all the time. In Genesis chapter 3, what you find out is human beings were placed on this earth to work, okay, to take care of the world, to be stewards, to take the things that God gave them and then use them in service for others, all right? But the fall was this. Basically, Satan came in and said, you know what? God's not telling you everything, you know what? And you need to start thinking about yourself. God's not telling you the truth. He's not giving you all the knowledge that you should have. This tree that he says you shouldn't eat from, why not? And so what happened was the first human beings disobeyed God, and they placed themselves in the middle, and it was all out of a purpose of self-service. I'm going to serve myself. I want this. I need this. And sinful nature, the disease that I carry within myself, that's how I define sin. It's a disease, not an action. It's the actions the bad things that I do are an outpouring of that disease I have. That disease turns me inward, and it causes me to say, it's mine. Not yours, not anybody else's. This is mine. So it's my time, it's my treasures, it's my talents. And I'm going to do with them what I want because they belong to me. But do you see, deep down inside, I know, even when I say those things, I know that one day, when I go to be with the Lord, I can't take any of it with me. It's silly. It's silly. There are people that have built palaces. You can go to Europe and you can see these beautiful, huge palaces. They built all these things. Where are the people that built them? They're gone. They don't own them. Because the stuff they used to make that was all put together by God. And the people who designed it and put together, all the talents that were put to work to make those beautiful things were given by God. You see? You think about it that way, but this is the way that I sometimes use gifts. Imagine that you get a Christmas present, okay? Imagine you get a Christmas present. And, I was one who was always very self-aware of how, I love my grandparents. I really do. My grandparents were, and still are, amazing blessing to me. And they would sometimes spoil me for Christmas, and I would make sure when I opened up a present that I would take very good care to show that I was very thankful for it. Even if I wasn't necessarily, oh, good clothes, yeah, and I would usually open the clothes first. I would shake things, figure out where the clothes were, get that first, and the cool stuff, the stuff I really wanted, would come last. So I'd use all my energy on the stuff I wasn't looking forward to, the clothes, But could you imagine getting something from somebody you truly care about, that you truly have a great relationship with? They give you a gift, and you take that gift and you say, and you throw it in the trash. Or you just take it and you say, cool, it's mine, awesome, and you just walk away. You don't say anything. When I have that attitude, this is mine, this time is mine, these treasures are mine, these talents that I have, they belong to me. They make me special and make me better than other people. And, when we just take ownership and just say, it's all my stuff. Do you see what it does? Do you see what kind of attitude it brings? Do you see the type of hurt that it can not only do to me, but actually to the people around me? see, it makes sense when you start thinking of all this. And when you understand when I understand how self-absorbed I can be sometimes, it makes perfect sense that God sent his son Jesus to give his life for me. This is why the gospel, which means good news, and it's the good news that God had mercy on his people, on me, the self-absorbed me who says, God, I don't need you. It's all my stuff. Leave me alone. He's like a grandparent who looks at that child that's just walking away, sticking, arms crossed in the corner saying, I love you anyway. Might shake his head at me sometime. I know he shakes his head at me quite frequently, I'm sure. But, looking at me and loving me. And the good news of Jesus is that God loved me so much that he would give everything for me. Everything. That is the greatest gift. The gospel is the greatest gift because the gift of Jesus says this. It says that you are loved. You are God's beloved child. You are made his child by the work of Jesus through faith in him. The gift of Jesus means that no matter what kind of baggage you're carrying around, you are forgiven. You can let it go. You can start over. New beginning. Fresh start. Today. Right now. Jesus says, I love you. You are forgiven. You belong to me. You are my child. Let that stuff go. The good news of Jesus is this. It's that I am free. I don't have to. I was thinking when Laura was talking about that, the type A personality type thing, or in my own life sometimes I want to manage and control everything. And sometimes I even look at my gifts that way. I can't even handle it all, The good news of Jesus means, you know what? Sometimes I'm not going to. But you know what? I'm forgiven. Sometimes I just have to do the best I can and then lift it up to God and say, Lord, I know sometimes I'm going to screw it up. Forgive me, Lord. Forgive me. And I know because of Jesus that I don't have to do it perfectly. Doesn't that just take a load off your shoulders? Now when you experience the hope that Jesus offers, the hope that things will get better, that God is with me, he is with you, that God hears you, that he is present. And when that good news hits you right here in your heart, where you're oftentimes looking for other things to give you fulfillment, when it really hits you there, when God's love fills that hole within you, it's life transforming. I mean, that is where the healing comes from. Christ is my source of healing. He is the one that holds my marriage together. He is the one that keeps me in a relationship with people where sometimes it might be rocky. He is the one who helps me know that even though I have a lot of things that I'm in charge, that he's given me to take care of, to be a steward of, even though I mishandle them, he is with me, he loves me, and he offers me that fresh start every day, that new beginning. That is why a community like this is so important. An oasis, a place to just take the load off. And you see when his love is poured into your heart, when the peace that he offers, that comfort, when you truly put your hands down and stop trying to hold them at a distance. At least in my own life, what I've experienced is I start to look at the things around me. I'm like, thank you, Lord. Wow. Why would you trust me with this stuff? Why would you trust me with a 2-year-old? Why would you trust me with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old? Why would you trust me with, the gospel, these other things? I wanted to share this with you and help you to maybe see a little bit more why I'm going back to the gospel. In Luke chapter 10, verse 38, Jesus went, and some of you, we talked about this in Bible study on Thursday, for some of you who came. Jesus came to visit two people, Mary and Martha. I'll read this to you. And I think there's a great lesson to be learned in this. So Jesus was traveling, and he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed her into her house. Okay? And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. So Mary was interested in hearing what Jesus had to say. Okay? But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. Start doing some real stuff here, okay? Get to work. Tell her to get off her rear and start doing something, And this is crazy because she's drawing Jesus in on this. I mean, how many of you, get in a fight with a family? You have a guest over and you get in a fight with, your sister, brother, friend, husband, wife, and then the guest, you're like, hey, tell that person to get it together. Who would do that, right? Makes no sense. But that's what Martha does. And this is what Jesus says. He says, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. You see, and the things that I often find myself troubled with are all the gifts I've been given, what I'm going to do with it. And you see, when I get obsessed with the gifts my God-given gifts, sometimes I get obsessed with my doing. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? What should I be doing right? And Jesus says, he doesn't say that it's not a good thing to do. But do you notice that he says that we get anxious? He says, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but there is one thing that is necessary. There's one thing that is needful. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. And what he's saying, the one thing that is necessary, the one thing that is needful, is to sit at Jesus' feet and receive his unconditional love, his grace. Hear his word. Because he fills me up. I know this is so true, because if he fills me up and keeps me centered and helps me to keep all this other stuff, all this crazy stuff that gives me anxiety, he helps me keep it in perspective in a healthy way. And that's why his good news, his word, is something that ultimately, as a pastor, I've been called to be a steward of that. He gives me the good news of grace, and I'm called to share it with others. But it's not just for me to share with others. I believe that's absolutely true of each of you as well. Even if you don't feel like you have anything, the greatest thing that you can share with somebody is God's love. You know what? No matter how tough you might have it, God loves you. He is with you. That's the message of Jesus. And you know what? If you know somebody in that situation, I would encourage you maybe to bring them to Genesis Community, where we can wrap them up in our arms and help them to understand that they have a Savior, that a God who's not like a distant God that doesn't care at all. And you see, once you experience the love of Jesus, you begin to see that God gives other gifts, and you begin to be mindful of what we do with those things. As it says in 1 Peter 4:10, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. And this is something that I'm called to do in many facets of my life, in various ways. But I'd like to talk to you specifically about Genesis Community itself. One of the beautiful things about communities, within a community, you have a unique opportunity to connect with people in intimate ways and get to know what their needs are. And as you do so, you begin to understand how, or I should say what, some of your neighbors, some of your friends, some of these people need. And you may discover very quickly that they need exactly what you have. Maybe you're just somebody who's really good at offering a hug, who can be there for somebody. Maybe you're somebody who can make a meal really quick and take it to somebody's doorstep. Maybe you're somebody who's really good at putting stuff together. Maybe you're somebody who's just very thoughtful, a great thinker, and there's some other way that you can find, put that to work. That's something I'd love to partner with, really. I would like to partner with all of you on. Putting our gifts to work together in Genesis Community. It's biblical to say, what do I have and how might I put it to work? It all starts at the cross. It all starts at God's unconditional love, and it flows from there.